Charges may apply. £20 off normal RRP until 26th of May 2015.
It's 9 o'clock across the UK.
We don't think that you finish the job as unfairly and punitively as George Osborne wants to. He basically is saying we're not going to ask the very wealthiest to pay a single extra penny in taxation. We're only going to do this by walloping and whacking the working age poor.
The most talked about radio show is here. Call Clegg. Get straight through now. 0345 6060 973. Leading Britain's conversation. This is Call Clegg with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Only on LBC.
This is Nick Clegg with Call Clegg here on LBC. Now you can get your questions to me now by calling 0345 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk, and of course you can watch on the website lbc.co.uk. So let's go to the first caller, and the first caller is Philip in Finchley. Hello, Philip.
Good morning, Nick Clegg. How are you doing?
I'm right. How are you?
Oh, well, no, I could be better, could be worse.
Yeah, good.
So, Mr. Clegg, the reason I've given LBC a call today is because of the contaminated blood condition.
Yes.
Okay, I was up in Scotland yesterday, and I can tell you that we're absolutely disgusted. £12 million of taxpayers' money was spent on that. And
on the Penrose report.
On the Penrose report, and it was a whitewash. I think the only thing that Lord Penrose suggested or recommended, should I say, was that everybody in Scotland that had a blood transfusion between X and X dates should be tested for hepatitis C. What a complete waste of taxpayers' money! How many more scandals, Mr. Clegg, need to be revealed before the governments, plural, stand up and put an end to 30 years of campaigning? Mr. Clegg, I ask you, my dad, my uncle and my uncle were all affected by this. I had to watch, Mr. Clegg, last year, July, with my dad, and he went into King's College Hospital, had a liver transplant because of this disaster. Nothing that was his fault. Yeah. And Mr. Clegg, I asked you in your manifesto in 2010, you pledged to sort this out. Yet another broken promise from our governments. I am disgusted to call myself British.
Right. Well, Philip, I obviously can hear your fury, and I'm acutely aware. I saw the pictures myself of the campaigners setting fire to the Penrose report, and it's impossible for me to imagine the sense of injustice and hurt and anger and sort of unresolved justice that the families of those who had their blood infected in this way must feel. But forgive me, can I just ask you, Philip, what was it that you had hoped the Penrose report would recommend or would conclude?
I would like the Penrose report to put blame. Because this was no accident, Mr. Clegg. You know where the blood products come from. You know the history of this condition. I'm sure you do. If you don't, I'll be extremely surprised. You know that these were blood products.
Just to explain to my listeners, this is my job. It's on a previous watch. It has to be said, many, many years ago. Unfortunately, it was the fact that contaminated blood, much of it bought from the US and had been given by prostitutes who were infected with HIV and other conditions, was bought and was used by. But this time, it wasn't a devolved NHS. It was a UK NHS, and that's why we have the problem that we have, Philip. I know the Deputy Prime Minister knows that. That's just to explain to listeners. Philip, back to you.
Thank you very much. Yes. The blood products are fully aware of where they come from. What I hope the inquiry would have done, Mr. Clegg, there used to be, or there is, free networks of financial support. These people have never been given financial support, or sorry, I rephrase that, have never been given compensation. Never, ever, ever. And if that's a misconception, then that needs to be changed.
Now, there has been talk, and there have been some sorts of payments of compensation in Southern Ireland, but not in the UK.
There has, and as the Prime Minister said yesterday in the House of Commons, obviously first, quite rightly, if you like, issuing an apology on behalf of everybody who has been failed for the hurt that they have endured. But the reason I asked you, Philip, about what you wanted to report, because of course, in a sense, the report was independent. It was produced by Penrose, and as a government, I like to think we've done the only thing we could do, which is the right thing, which is to.
But Mr. Clegg, the English government have point blank refused for 30 years an inquiry. This was not an inquiry of the English government's making. This was an inquiry of the Scottish government's making. Yet again, it was pushed under the carpet by everybody in Westminster. Nobody in Westminster wanted to know. We as campaigners have been fighting to get an inquiry, but yet again we've been denied, been told. I think the words were, "There's everything that needs to be known in the public domain." Well, I think there's not. I think this cover-up, as most cover-ups do, goes very, very deep. Mr. Clegg, I have to ask you, how many more cover-ups? Now we've got the paedophilia with
Philip, forget. Look, I'm of course I cannot imagine what you've gone through, Philip, and you've just talked very movingly about your dad, and so and I know you're not going to find any of what I say, in a sense, is going to in any way assuage your sense of anger about all of this. But, the facts are that the Penrose report did look into the cases of the Scottish victims over that span of time from, 1970 through to, I think, the early 1990s. And it came up with the conclusions it did. It wasn't written by any politician. It wasn't written by the government. It's just been published. We have said as a government, clearly the next Parliament needs to act on that report, act on those recommendations, and provide proper compensation. And we've said already, yesterday, that £25 million is being made immediately available on top of the money that's already been made available. You've been very, very clear that none of that is satisfactory to you, but I'm not going to pretend to you that I can sort of imagine easily that someone's just going to suddenly rewrite a report that's been produced independently. I think that is unlikely, to be honest.
All right. Philip, listen, commiserations, condolences, very tough time for you. We will keep across that and see what other developments the campaigners are saying. This is no means the end of the campaign. Also, I think there's more life in that story. We move on to other matters. Deputy Prime Minister.
Charles in Maidstone. Charles?
Oh, good morning, Deputy Prime Minister. Good morning. Just a question, really. I think opinion polls are suggesting that your party is going to lose a lot of seats in the coming election. And I just wonder if you feel somehow disappointed or maybe even angry about that, because I think the government, the country, a lot of people I think would feel the country's in a slightly better place than it was 5 years ago. And
just a bit.
Your party doesn't seem to be getting any of the credit for that.
Forgive me, Charles, I've got a bit of cough. No, of course I don't feel. I mean, for starters, I actually think, Charles, we're going to do a lot better than people predict, for the very simple reason, by the way, that a sort of snapshot opinion poll over the whole of the country doesn't really pick up what's happening in the 10% or so parts of the country where Liberal Democrat campaigners are out, putting leaflets through doors and knocking on doors and talking to people and so on, and where we get the Liberal Democrats, that is, where we get our side of the story across, which, as you implied, Charles, I think is a good story, because, the country was on the brink back in 2010, and without us stepping up to the plate bravely and pluckily, in my view, we wouldn't now have the economic recovery, and we wouldn't have a whole range of other things which are of real tangible benefit to people. Tax cuts, more apprenticeships, better pensions, the pupil premium, healthy meals at lunchtime for kids at primary school, and so on and so forth. And look, so let's see what happens on May the 7th. But my hope is that where people get to hear our side of the story, and they do from us directly in those areas where we have a presence on the ground, actually will do much, much better than people anticipate.
Quick response from you, Charles?
Well, yeah, I'd just be interested. I'm interested to know really why the story isn't getting across from your side more than it is. I think people still hold in against you the tuition fees.
Sure.
Thing. I think, and I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think you could be expected to deliver on everything. After all, you weren't going into a government on your own. So,
no.
But I just think that it seems maybe a little unfair. I'm just.
Well, you said it.
You...
You said it. But listen, Charles. I think one of the reasons, of course, is that we live in a political culture which is accustomed to the idea of the two larger parties playing sort of Buggins' turn with the British government. So it's the red team and there's the blue team. It's the red team, and they've got their big vested interests. The trade unions fund the Labour Party. You've got the big money funding the Tories. You've got all of their supporters in the press lined up on one side of the fence or the other. And suddenly the yellow team comes along and gets its foot in the door, and they hate it. Both sides absolutely hate it. And so the red team and the blue team spend the last half decade yelling at us furiously from right and left. And so obviously we get yelled at a lot. And I take that with as good humour and good grace as I can.
At work or at home?
What? At work. And to be serious, Charles, I'm of course that means that some of our achievements, which we're very, very proud of, the tax cuts, getting the economy sorted out, pushing for more money in school for kids from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, and so on and so forth, gets a bit drowned out by that endless kind of yelling from right and left. But I don't spend much time whinging about it, or certainly not feeling angry or aggrieved about it. That's just the way life is. I'm a pragmatic politician. What I would say to you, Charles, however, is what I can control, or what I can do, is, as I will be, for instance, later today, is sort of knocking on doors in my own constituency and telling my own side of the story. And where Liberal Democrats do that, I think we do get a fair hearing and a good hearing.
All right. In fact, I think that's where we might be going next.
Chris in Sheffield. Yeah, hello,
there
Chris. Hello.
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 Good morning.
Morning.
Clegg. My question is really about your not being in Sheffield often enough, and certainly not going to Sheffield to stand in front of your constituencies and debate with your opponents.
I'm doing it today.
In a hustings. Well, you're not doing it in front of your constituents, Mr. Clay. You're doing it in front of an invited audience of school children. Now, this isn't really what a hustings debate is about, is it? I'm more concerned about your hypocrisy in criticising Mr. Cameron for ducking the debates when you're doing exactly the same thing yourself.
What a silly thing to say, Chris. Heaven's sake. There's a hustings today organised by our great local newspaper, the Sheffield Star, and they decide how to organise it. And now you're ringing up and saying that somehow I am now somehow at fault for the way the Sheffield Star...
I'm going to support Chris here, because it says it will be held in front of a small invited audience, invited by whom?
They've decided to do that.
Take place at a secret location.
No, it's not.
I don't want to compromise your security. Can you tell me where it is?
Well, it's at the school.
Well, presumably there's more than one.
Yes, I know there's one, but I mean, look, I'm...
So my caller, Chris, is right.
Yes.
It's children. But you're debating children.
Hang on, this is...
Not that I've got anything against Sheffield children.
Chris, why don't you pick up the phone and speak to the local newspaper about the reasons why they've decided to organise their hustings? I'm invited...
I'm on the phone to you, Mr. Clegg, asking you why this is the only debate, and it's not a true debate, that you're prepared to participate in your own constituency.
But Chris, as you clearly don't know, as someone, I have represented Sheffield Hallam and done so very happily, and it's one of the greatest privileges of my political life for the last 10 years, and week in, week out, I'm out and about in Sheffield. In fact, this very evening, after I do these hustings, I'm holding a public question and answer session, as I do week in, week out, where hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, over the last...
May we know where that is?
It's in, where is it? It's in Ecclesall. In a
town hall or community hall or something?
It's in a church hall.
In a church hall, right, OK.
And you're perfectly free to come to that.
I appreciate you've got security considerations.
No, Chris, why did you come to Bannercross? Why did you come to Bannercross this evening, where everybody else from... Are you a constituent of mine, Chris?
I am.
Yeah, why don't you come to Bannercross?
If I'm not on the list, I won't get in.
Of course you can come if you want to come this evening.
No, I've been to your debates. You have to apply in advance and be on the list.
Well,
and you have to turn up with your passport to show who you are. This isn't a public debate in any real sense of the word. And the other candidates aren't there. You're not debating with the other candidates. You're answering questions from a hand-picked audience, effectively.
I'm not, Chris. This is just ludicrous. This is such a sort of silly thing to say. I hold, in a way, by the way, that most MPs don't, open question and answer sessions, and anyone can come along if they want. Of course, they have to apply, so we know...
Why are you doing it in a school?
What?
Why are you doing it in a school?
I don't know. It's Sheffield. The Sheffield Stars decided to do that.
Well, why didn't you say, yes, can I do one in the works canteen of the Sheffield bus garage or whatever it might be called?
Why is it the only one he's agreed to do? It's because of the way the Sheffield Star have organised it.
Well, Chris, listen, you've obviously got a bit of an axe to grind, and I'm never going to satisfy you. You come along again to Bannercross this evening. I can guarantee you that no other candidate in Sheffield Hallam has made themselves as readily available as I have to thousands upon thousands of my constituencies, year in, year out now for the last decade. You're clearly a bit grumpy about the way that Sheffield staff organise this. I can't help you with...
in the pub and coffee mornings and invites people by leaflets to the door. Anybody can turn
OK, Chris, for all I know, you might be a Labour
yes, I was just going to say, are you a UKIP campaigner
fine.
Or something, Chris?
No, he'll be
hardly a UKIP campaigner.
You're a Labour
campaigner.
I am a constituent. I have a vote. I also have a right to see my MP who's asking to be elected.
So why don't you come along to Bannercross this evening?
Because you won't be debating with the other candidates, and it's not the same thing.
Well, Chris, I don't think I'm ever going to satisfy you, so...
All right, Chris. Can I ask which way you intend to vote? You don't have to answer this, but which way you intend to vote?
At the moment, not for Mr. Clegg.
All right, well, there's
a surprise.
But you could always be one back. We move on to other matters. Mr.
Mike
Clegg.
in Cheshunt. Hello, Mike.
Good morning, Mr. Clegg. Nice to talk to you for the last time. The House of Lords Economic Affairs Select Committee, the Public Accounts Select Committee, supported by the National Audit Office, and public opinion all tell you the case for HS2 has not been made. Now, to ignore this overwhelming evidence is at best arrogant, Mr. Clegg. Isn't it time for the government to scrap this project now and stop wasting more of the taxpayers' money that frankly could be better spent on the NHS and other important issues?
Mike, no, I don't agree, and of course I hear what you say about the committee from the House of Lords today about HS2, but other reports, of course, have come out with very different conclusions. So the very authoritative reports by David Higgins came to quite a different conclusion and said that the congestion and overcrowding and the overburdening, if you like, of our current railway infrastructure requires a long-term solution where we really unblock the main arteries of our rail transport network. And HS2 is a very, very kind of smart way of doing that, because it means that we can get people up and down the kind of north-south spine of the country much more quickly with far greater capacity than we presently have, so that we don't do what we've basically been doing for the last several decades, is a very expensive sort of patch and mend job where we kind of, patch up this bit of the railway network, patch up that bit of the railway network, but don't really provide the long-term capacity to allow millions and millions of people to travel freely across the country in the future. And obviously, as a Sheffield MP, I feel particularly strongly that it is a good thing to link the north and the south of the country more effectively together. But I just also think we need to learn, in a sense, from our predecessors who, in the Victorian era, built ambitious infrastructure to last. In fact, it was so ambitious and it lasted so well, we're still using our Victorian infrastructure. And I think rather than just sort of patching and mending it, we should actually revamp our infrastructure in a big way.
Mr. Clegg, nobody who is against this £50 billion project is suggesting we do not improve our rail infrastructure. Yes, we must for future generations. What people are saying is the cost of 250-mile-an-hour trains is astronomical. It cannot be justified. And yes, you mentioned David Higgins. Well, he's the chairman of HS2. I would hardly expect him to come out and say, actually, I don't agree with HS2. We're paying this man £750,000 a year. When I say we, I mean the taxpayer. Of course he's in favour of HS2. But why is it you and Mr. Cameron and your MPs and colleagues refuse to believe these committees, which have, the respect of the public? You just told a previous caller, I believe, the first chap that called in, you told him there'd been an independent report, and you more or less told him that he should accept that. Well, you don't practice what you preach, because there's been plenty of independent reports from very respected House of Commons and House of Lords committees, but you choose to ignore them.
No, look, I perfectly accept this is a contested issue. I don't accept that all the monopoly of wisdom is on the side of those who criticise HS2. I also I think it's just an observable fact that as a country, certainly compared to other countries around the world who've invested huge amounts of money in high-speed rail and have done so many, many years ago and have benefited from it very considerably, we're very much a laggard. And I think there's a bit of a pattern in Britain for us to kind of try and improve our infrastructure in a sort of higgledy-piggledy way, on the cheap, a little bit of improvement here, a little bit of improvement there. HS2 is an opportunity to do something transformative, which will stand the test of time for many, many generations, because it will provide extra capacity on our very, very overburdened railway network for a very, very long period of time. And I think there's very credible evidence, not just from Higgins but from others, to show that is a sensible thing to do. And it doesn't crowd out, this is the point I would make to you though, it doesn't crowd out investment in ongoing investment, maintenance and other forms of improvement to the road and rail network at the same time. And some of the suggestions made that it gobbles up all the available money simply is not correct.
Can I ask a couple of questions? How wise was it of the Prime Minister to say that he would not seek to fight another general election as Prime Minister should he be successful in this one in May?
Ask him. I mean, he's
well, I'm asking you. He's already commented. Well, I tell you what, would you seek to fight the election after this as leader of the Liberal Democrats?
Listen, I'd happily settle for a couple of terms as Prime Minister. That's fine.
No, as leader of the Liberal Democrats, I said.
Oh no,
after this general election.
Of course, I intend to see through the next term. And look, then let's just take one term at a time. But
so you might go as well in 5 years' time.
No, I don't. Let's not get into this parlour game. You didn't rule this out.
Are you happy to commit?
Am I going to carry on until 2070?
Yes.
2070. Yes, there you go. Guarantee.
You're happy to go all the way.
2170. Why not? Let's go.
I'm very concerned about it. The Prime Minister took his children into the last Prime Minister's question. Yes. Did you bring your children in?
To Prime Minister's questions?
To look from the gallery.
No.
Why not? Why would he do that and you didn't do that? Why wouldn't they want to witness it?
For a start, he was speaking at Prime Minister's questions and I wasn't.
But they'd like to see their dad do that, wouldn't they?
Do you know, it had literally never occurred to me to bring my children to watch that ludicrous spectacle in Prime Minister's questions yesterday. But listen, he's doing the talking along with Ed Miliband. I'm not, so he's perfectly entitled to ask his kids along.
Has James Landale asked to come to your kitchen?
No, I've done a piece with James. We drunk a pint outside a country pub.
Oh, that's been broadcast,
yes,
is it?
Missed it.
No, I'm afraid I missed that. Yeah. Would you ever walk to school with your children the way Ed Miliband does, being filmed by ITV?
Miriam and I have always been very adamant that we will talk, as I've regularly done here, with great pride and love and affection. I'm besotted by my children. I will do that all day long if invited to do so, but we never ever have our children on public display, just because we don't. I mean, look, and I'm not, David Cameron and Ed Miliband, they should make their own decisions as every parent is entitled to, but I think my children are entitled to the kind of privacy of an innocent childhood, and I felt very strongly about that as long as I've been in politics.
This is the last week, really, of the coalition before you all go off and fight.
Yes, we had our last cabinet day yesterday.
When's the party, and can I come?
No, you can't come, but because there isn't a party.
There's no party to celebrate what you've achieved?
No, we're not going to go and tear strips
some Twiglets and some Lambrusco.
We exchanged beer and crisps.
Did you?
Yeah.
When was that?
On Tuesday. I gave a packet of Yorkshire crisps to all the cabinet, yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Special
Henderson's.
There we are. Get
Sheffield
the name
crisps.
out there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, who was it? Chris from Sheffield.
No, yeah. Henderson Yorkshire crisps, right? And what did you get back? Did anybody give you anything?
David Cameron produced a bottle of beer with a sort of picture of the coalition on it for everybody. So it's beer and crisps.
It's living the dream there, isn't it?
Yeah,
we move on.
Deborah in Enfield.
Right.
Hello, Deborah.
Harold Wilson's days. Deborah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Mr. Clegg. I was just wondering if I can ask you why neither yourself or any of the party leaders actually came out and condemned the attack on Mr. Farage and his family at the weekend.
I did, actually.
Really?
Yes, I did. I think I couldn't agree with you more, Deborah. I thought it was absolutely appalling. I mean, of course, I disagree with Nigel Farage, but and this is what I read as well, like you, Deborah, and I was quite angered on his behalf that his children apparently were very upset and quite shaken.
They ran off and hid.
Yeah, and my heart goes out to them because they're children and they don't deserve to be sort of brought into the kind of crosshairs of people's protests against Nigel Farage. So I tweeted my support for him and his family because I think he has every right as a dad to have lunch unmolested with his own kids.
Straight answer to a straight question, or as the Prime Minister put it, straight question to a straight answer. In fact, as he said yesterday, it's his moment of glory. He just blasted the ball over the net. But let's not be picky. We move on, Deputy Prime Minister.
Mark in Ipswich. Hello, Mark.
Good morning. Good morning to you both. Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Clegg, Deputy Prime Minister, I've had a lot of friends being ex-forces who've suffered from mental health issues. And for many years, in fact, in 2009, I attended a conference on mental health and trying to break the taboo, the public taboo that surrounds mental health. Now, I think one of the things that really brought mental health to the fore was the tragic death of Gary Speed, the ex-footballer and Wales manager, and that was in 2011, if I remember rightly. Now, Mr. Clegg, you've been in government for nearly 5 years, and it's only recently, as part of your pre-election promise, you've taken a public interest in mental health.
No.
Whilst I commend the fact that you have publicly come out and said that there needs to be less of a taboo and there needs to be more money for it, why the heck haven't you done this before? You've had nearly 5 years to do this.
So, Mark, I utterly reject this idea that it's something I've done. I mean, actually, one of the first questions I ever asked shortly after I became leader of the Liberal Democrats 7 years ago in Prime Minister's Questions, and I think I was one of the first people to ever do so at Prime Minister's Questions at that sort of level, was to raise mental health. It's something I've campaigned on all my political life, and far from just taking sort of recent steps. Soon after we came into government, I made sure that we changed the legal mandate of the NHS to give mental health and physical health the same legal status and significance in the NHS. We then, very shortly after we came into office, announced £400 million to increase talking therapies. Subsequent to that, £150 million I announced for additional investment into helping particularly teenagers with eating disorders. As of next month, on April the 5th, because of decisions I took some years ago, because it obviously takes some time to prepare these things, there will be access and waiting time standards, Mark, operating in mental health in the NHS for the first time ever. So from April the 5th, in a few days' time, April the 5th, if you suffer from depression, you will be, the majority of people who are suffering from depression will be seen within a specified 6-week period, just as you would have an access or waiting time standard entitlement for a physical health issue. And as you I hope saw last week, I also actually announced additional money which has been agreed, and it's going to happen, to invest in the help given to veterans with mental health problems. And that was following many visits I've made, most recently in Colchester, to organisations who help veterans with mental health issues. So do I think everything can be transformed, Mark, overnight? No, of course not. Can you change something from a standing start just like that with a sort of flick of a switch? No, of course not, because this is the result of years, if not decades, of underinvestment in mental health. But I firmly reject this idea that somehow this is some sort of last-minute idea. It's something I've been campaigning on for close to the last, in fact, all my political life.
Let me try and get some email questions into our conversation, Deputy Prime Minister. Anthony in Kent asks, was the BBC right to let Jeremy Clarkson go?
If that's their judgment as his employer,
but what do you think? Do your sons watch Top Gear?
Yeah.
They like it?
Yeah, sure.
Well, they would, young men.
Lots of people do. Lots of people do.
Sure.
Lots of people.
Will they miss him? Is he sort of one of them?
I'm sure they will. By the way, lots of people. But I mean, look, to be fair to the BBC, Tony Hall, the head of the BBC, has said, look, he's a great entertainer. Lots of people will miss him. That's not the issue. The issue is something related to an event which I'm not simply wasn't.
You must have a view. Listen, as a bloke,
if he's done what the BBC say he's done and punched someone, abused someone, so on, then I think they're perfectly in their right as an employer to say we no longer want to employ you. And it's not really for me or anybody else to start second-guessing their sort of management decision. Do I think he'll be a loss as an entertainer on Top Gear? Well, obviously, he's an incredibly effective entertainer. But they're two separate things. What happened in that hotel in Yorkshire and whether my kids like Top Gear are two separate things.
Are you going to be throwing bricks at the television tonight when you see Ed Miliband and David Cameron taking part in this sort of debate? But it's not a debate, being interviewed, but you're not being interviewed.
Well, of course I would have liked to have been part of that.
Why didn't they want you?
Well, I wasn't invited to be part of that. And nor have I been invited to be part of the debate in a few weeks' time in the one in which David Cameron and I are not taking part. And look, the debates are now going to happen as they are. I welcome the fact they are going to happen now, finally, after this endless sort of toing and froing. Would I, in principle, have wanted to take part in all of every stage?
You're going to watch it?
Well, no, I'll be in Sheffield, actually.
Oh, that's right, yes, inviting Chris to that,
inviting Chris to...
Having had that bruising hustings at a school. How old are the children?
To the Soviet
5?
Siberian-style closed prison Q&A.
How many letters from Prince Charles have you received?
I don't think I have. I mean, I've obviously met him on a number of occasions.
The judgment is due later today on whether the government has blocked publication of letters to certain ministers in which it is alleged Prince Charles sought to express his views. How helpful would it be for us to have some light shed on this and know what Prince Charles thinks?
Look, I mean, this I think relates to correspondence, going back to previous governments, and it's not really for me as a member of this government to start sort of trying to reopen the correspondence.
There's been a Supreme Court ruling, I think, almost any minute.
But do I think that when Prince Charles sent those letters, he's entitled to assume that they were, they would remain private? I think he probably is, but that's exactly what this case is all about.
So, do you think we should see them?
To be honest, I think there's a perfectly legitimate role to say at a certain point that that correspondence like that, since it was intended to be private, should remain private.
Okay. And lastly, police conducted, it is reported, spying operations on a string of Labour politicians during the 1990s. So says a whistleblowing former undercover police officer. Politicians such as Jack Straw, Diane Abbott, Ken Livingstone, and others, even the late Bernie Grant.
I think it's just. I mean, if this is right, it's absolutely terrible. I mean, the idea of the police sort of snooping and monitoring elected politicians, in effect because of their views. I mean, that's the implication of this, is that because they were sort of deemed to be from the left, that they were somehow sort of dodgy, is absolutely appalls me. And I know there's an inquiry, Theresa May has announced a wider inquiry into undercover police tactics. I think it's called the Pitchford inquiry, and I very much hope it'll look at these allegations, because they're not the kind of thing you want in a free society. Politicians, regardless of their views, should be able to represent their constituents and express their opinions without being monitored by the police.
And lastly, I'm pleased I got an email come in from a woman, because we haven't had a lot of female representation, and this is put right by a Wendy in Dartford, who said, you asked Nick Clegg about going on Mumsnet as making sure more women become MPs. What's Wendy on about there, Deputy Prime Minister?
So I was on Mumsnet. I did it after Prime Minister's questions yesterday. I thought I'd do my own question and answer session, which was great.
Well, what's this, for heaven's sake? What have we been doing for 2.5 years?
And indeed this. And the issue was raised.
You want more female MPs?
Yes, there are. Clearly there are not nearly enough women MPs in the Liberal Democrats. There aren't enough women in Parliament generally.
What puts off women? I appreciate you're not one, but what do you suppose puts women? Is it a bit too boisterous and yah-boo and public school boys?
I think the way in which Westminster works and all this kind of testosterone-driven macho yelling is pretty off-putting to any normal person, to both men and perhaps most especially to women. But the question is, what do you do about it? Now, in my party, we are doing a lot of mentoring and training and financial support and other forms of support to get women elected in seats where we have a chance of having Liberal Democrat MPs elected. But I've come to my own personal views. If the Liberal Democrats don't crack this problem at the next election in May, then we should consider doing something that other parties have done, which is maybe for a temporary period of time reserving certain positions or positions for certain candidates for women and other candidates from other underrepresented groups. Because
so white males need not apply.
Well, look, it's a controversial thing. It always quite rightly provokes a lot of debate. Particularly in a Liberal party, because people say, isn't the danger that smacks of tokenism and so on? But we cannot carry on purporting to represent modern Britain if modern Britain is not represented in us. So, we're doing everything to. So, for instance, of the 11 Liberal Democrat MPs standing down, the vast majority of candidates standing to replace them are women or candidates from black minority ethnic backgrounds and others.
Right.
But if that doesn't work, I'm saying I certainly don't think.
So my dream of representing Smethwick for the Lib Dems is just lying in shatters now. It's never going to happen,
well,
is it?
You could call yourself Nicola Ferrari.
Well, I could do that. Now, before I let you go, have you got a minute? Have you seen this special spoof version of Uptown Funk?
No.
Released, well, we can't show you the pictures, but here's the audio. Nick Clegg doing Bruno Mars, or is it the other way round?
This hits everyone in our country. We've achieved great things. The Conservatives don't do it. Labour don't do it in 2020. What sort of Britain? What great singing voice. Hard-working and welcoming. So let me be clear. Britain, and we are too hot. Liberal Democrats working for a stronger economy. Too hot. Liberal Democrats working for a fairer society. Too hot. Liberal Democrats say my name. Do you catch on?
I doubt it. You can see it on lbc.co.uk. Yes, you can see it on lbc.co.uk. Lots of jump cuts of Mr. Clegg. A quick verdict on the audio, at least.
I think the singing voice is obviously just top-notch form.
Right, good luck with the bruising battle you face in the schoolrooms.
Thank you very much.
Sheffield from the 11-year-olds. That was Call Clegg. We welcome you back, of course, here on LBC when news is next.
Germanwings says it can't confirm or deny reports one pilot left the cockpit of the plane that crashed in the French Alps and wasn't able to get back in. In a statement, it says they haven't received any information from the authorities leading the investigation. The New York Times says a senior military source claims he's heard audio from the black box recorder and the pilot was banging on the door trying to get in. The Supreme Court is due to decide this morning if letters written by Prince Charles to government ministers should be made public. The Attorney General's office is challenging a ruling by the Court of Appeal that it unlawfully stopped their release. The Deputy Prime Minister has told LBC when written the correspondence was intended to remain private.
Do I think that when Prince Charles sent those letters, he's entitled to assume that they were, they would remain private? I think he probably is. I think there's a perfectly legitimate role to say at a certain point that, that correspondence like that, since it was intended to be private, should remain private.
A former undercover officer says the Met Police spied on senior Labour MPs, including former Home Secretary Jack Straw in the 1990s. Peter Francis spent 11 years working for Scotland Yard's Special Branch and claims the force held information on 10 MPs. At 9:15, the FTSE was down 72 at 69.18. And LBC weather, cloud and rain clearing by midday for London and the southeast, then becoming mainly dry with sunny spells, highs of 12 degrees. A wet start across the UK with snow over hills. Those showers will gradually clear in most areas, leaving a dry day with sunny intervals in Wales, Northern Ireland and England. Scattered showers for Scotland and Northern England with the odd bright spell. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Lisa Aziz.
I'm Chris Golds in the LBC Travel Centre. Still very wet out there on the roads this morning, so do take extra care. There's a lot of surface water around. On the roads, the M25 anti-clockwise, there's a lane closed on the exit slip road because a lorry's broken down at junction 13 for Staines. It's the inside lane that's blocked at the end of the slip road just before the roundabout. Elsewhere on the M25, also anti-clockwise, it's pretty much stop-start looking at the sensors between junction 21 for the M1 and 16 for the M40. Clockwise on the M25, that's slow between junction 5 for the M26 and 7 for the M23. Also clockwise on the M25, slow between junction 9 for Leatherhead and 12 for the M3. There are queues northbound towards the Blackwall Tunnel from the Sun and the Sands after a car broke down earlier, plus another car broke down in the queues as well, so that didn't help matters. It's slow back onto the A2 from Eltham. An accident on the A21 Bromley Hill at London Lane makes it very slow on both approaches, and there are queues on the A3 Kennington Park Road in both directions towards Oval Station because of roadworks. There's queues from Brixton Station and from Clapham North Station as well. And Warwickshire on the M42 southbound, that's very slow between junction 7A for the M6 and junction 7 for Coleshill. Take about 2 hours to get from junction 11 for Burton upon Trent. Also in the West Midlands on the M42 southbound, there's delays of around 75 minutes from junction 5 for Solihull. Keeping you moving, this is LBC.
This is LBC.
Mum, I've lost my phone.
OK, think. Where did you last have it?
I don't know. I've lost it. What am I going to do? It's the end of the world.
Don't panic. That new nationwide Flex Plus current account your dad and I just opened comes with worldwide family mobile phone insurance.
Yeah, but what if
And we're automatically covered from the moment we open the account. So we can just... What's that ringing?
Oh, it's my phone. It's in the bottom of my bag. OK, I've got to go. See you later. Bye.
Bye then.
They say money makes the world go round. But at Nationwide, we think it's people. Which is why we created Flex Plus. A current account that comes with 3 de facto 5-star rated insurance products and other features your family could benefit from for just £10 a month. Nationwide, on your side.
You must be 18 and over to apply. Flex Plus Worldwide Family Mobile Phone Insurance has been arranged for Nationwide by Lifestyle Services Group Limited with a single provider, London General Insurance Company Limited. Policy excesses, limitations and exclusions apply.
Getting twitchy around messy eaters. Washing socks in the bath. Sniffing shirts. going face first into the laundry bin, like a pearl diver, searching for that clean pair of pants. Running scared. From ketchup. Life's hard when your washing machine packs up. That's why we'll deliver and install your new machine in one visit. Plus recycle the old one, even at weekends. Know-how from Curry's PC World. We start with you. Delivery in most areas, subject to availability.
This Friday, Euro Millions from the National Lottery is making 10 guaranteed UK millionaires who will also win a car of their dreams. It's another Mega Friday. Play makes it possible. Game-specific rules for non-cash prizes available at nationallottery.co.uk. Games rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
When it comes to driving in Old Blighty, you do things a little differently. There's not miles of long, straight roads over here, just roundabouts. Roads with barely enough room for a car, let alone a man in a van coming the other way. And of course, the speed bumps. Brilliant, isn't it? That's why the Volvo V40R design was tuned and tested to tackle those wonderfully British roads. And from just $269 a month with Volvo car leasing, it's even been tuned for the British economy.
3-year